How's it going, everyone? Bass here, and the Packers schedule has finally arrived. So today I'm going to be breaking down each and every game, what the matchups looks like for the Packers, and also giving my prediction on a win or a loss for that game. But before we get to the schedule breakdown, if you aren't subscribed already and you are enjoying my content, please consider going down below and clicking that subscribe button. So just a few schedule notes. So the first stretch of this schedule is going to be pretty difficult. The Packers play the first 6 of their 9 games away from home. The Packers will also play an NFL high 10 games against playoff teams from last year, which is worrisome. They do have a nice home stretch at the end of the year, which is definitely better considering the colder weather. 4 of their final 6 are in Lambeau. Speaking of colder weather, also all December games will be outdoors, which is wonderful. Also, weirdly enough, there's only one noon game at Lambeau this year, which is a little weird. A lot of 325s, and then of course primetime. The Packers do have 5 primetime matchups, which is tied for the most in NFL. So one last thing before I get this started, I'm basing this off of Aaron Rodgers playing as the Green Bay Packers quarterback this year, playing week 1, starting week 1. He is under contract. So for this video, Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback of the Green Bay Packers. So for the 2021 NFL season opener, the Packers head down to New Orleans, games at 3:25 Central Time. So the interesting thing about this game is, are we going to see Jameis Winston or Taysom Hill at quarterback? Obviously, the Saints lost Drew Brees. They also lost Jared Cook and Emmanuel Sanders on that offense. Now, their defense was pretty good last year, but they also lost Trey Hendrickson, Malcolm Brown, Sheldon Rankins, Alex Anzalone, Janoris Jenkins. They had to clear house just to get under the cap. So I could easily see the Saints regressing a lot. I could easily see them being 4th in their division. That's a tough division. Obviously with the Panthers, there's still a question mark there with Darnold, but the Falcons are a talented team. And then of course the Buccaneers just won the Super Bowl. So I could easily see the Saints regressing all the way to 4th in that division. So I think this is an easy markup as a win for Green Bay. In week 2, the Green Bay Packers play their first home game versus the Detroit Lions on Monday Night Football at 7:15 Central Time. I'm very interested to see Jared Goff, especially considering this offense on the Detroit Lions does not look good at all. Now, Goff did play pretty well. He did what he had to do against the Packers in the playoffs. But again, this Lions offense is not as good. Now, they did lose Kerryon Johnson. They did just cut him, but they did bring in our favorite Jamal Williams, which personally I think is an upgrade. Jamal's a great player. But they did lose 4 wide receivers in Kenny Golladay, Marvin Jones, Marvin Hall, and Danny Amendola. So their wide receiver room is going to look completely different this year. And that's not a great thing to do when you also have a brand new quarterback. They're all going to have to get on the same page. And I think it's going to look pretty ugly. The receivers they added is Tyrell Williams, Brashad Perriman, Amon-Ra St. Brown in the draft, and they also have Geronimo and Wisconsin Badger Quintez Cephas there still in the room. Now the Lions did have a very solid draft. Obviously getting Sewell there, he'll start in right at their right tackle right away. Now he's young, so might have some growing pains with him to begin, but he should be a very solid player in the NFL. But their draft is good, but at the end of the day, they are a team that's rebuilding. And on the defensive side, they also lost a lot of good quality players. They lost Danny Shelton, Jared Davis, Desmond Trufant, Justin Coleman. They did add Fatu Melifonwu in the draft at corner, but they also lost safety Duron Harmon. So I really see this Lions team regressing. I could easily see them as well as the Saints being the 4th in the respective division, the NFC North. I see the Lions being the 4th in this division. So this is another win for the Packers here. So moving on to week 3, the Packers have yet another primetime game, and this one is in San Francisco. San Fran's such an interesting team because they were so good a couple years back, and last year they were just so injury plagued. But they're still obviously such a very talented team, and Jimmy G, we should suspect him being the starting quarterback to start the year, and most likely the starting quarterback here in week 3, unless something drastic happens where Trey Lance has to go in. Now they get healthy Deebo Samuel back, George Kittle back, they get Raheem Mostert back. It's a trigger warning, guys. And they get, Nick Bosa back. They signed Samson Ebukam for that Sam role, pun intended. There's still a question mark at the cornerback outside of Jason Verrett. Now, obviously, Richard Sherman still is a free agent. He could be brought back, and I would definitely, make their defense a lot better. Their secondary a lot better with Verrett and Sherman there. But overall, this is a very solid team when healthy. Us Packers fans should know more than anyone else. When everything's working over there in San Fran and all their pieces are moving nicely, very, very, very good team. This is in San Francisco prime time. I see the Packers getting their first loss here. So moving on to week 4, the Packers go back to Lambeau Field, and this time they got the Steelers at 325. Steelers have a bit of a change up on offense. Let go of James Conner at running back, drafted Najee Harris at running back, but offensive line, regardless, is still a weak point. They lost Villanueva, Pouncey retired, so their offensive line is still a big question mark, regardless of who they have at running back. Wide receivers on the Pittsburgh Steelers stay exactly the same. Tight end's a little bit different. They still have Ebron starting there, but they did add Pat Freiermuth at tight end. He's more of a blocking type tight end, so I wouldn't look too much into that. Eric Ebron's still going to be the starter there. As for their front seven, it kind of stays the same. They did lose Bud Dupree. Alex Highsmith will replace him. But overall, the Steelers team did remain generally the same. Now, where it does differ is definitely their cornerback room. They lost Mike Hilton and Steven Nelson. I think their pass defense will struggle heavily. Safeties are the same in Edmonds and Minkah Fitzpatrick, but I don't think the Steelers will be anywhere near as good as they were this year. So I'm marking this one up as another win for Green Bay. Moving on to week 5, the Packers head out to Cincinnati to play the Bengals at 12 o'clock. This is a game I probably will be going to myself. Very interested to see Burrow, how he responds to that injury, that ACL injury. He does have the new weapon in Jamar Chase, who obviously he wanted from LSU, but his offensive line is still atrocious. Joe Burrow will still be running for his life. The only difference in his offensive line is Riley Reif, who they added, who's not really much of an upgrade at all. Now, over on defense, this is where this team added a lot of pieces. They added Trey Hendrickson, a great edge rusher from New Orleans. They drafted Joseph Asai. They also added defensive tackle DJ Reader from Houston, who's a very, very solid defensive tackle. Still a bit of a weak point in their linebacker room, and they also did lose cornerback William Jackson, but they went ahead and signed a plethora of cornerbacks in the likes of Chidobe Awuzie, Trey Waynes, Mike Hilton, Eli Apple, so it's very clear they're trying to fix their cornerback room and just try to, make it good. Overall, this is still a developing team that, could potentially pick top 10 again next year, which that division's a very hard division to play in. The Browns are a great team. The Ravens are a great team. The Steelers are a very good team. So I still see the Bengals being the 4th in that division. So for this one, I give the Packers another dub. So moving on here to week 6, we have our second divisional game at Chicago at 12 o'clock. So with this game, I'm going to assume Andy Dalton is the starter. This is week 6. We know how the Bears work. We know how the Bears fans work. Andy Dalton could throw 2 interceptions in a game and they'll be screaming for Fields at that point already. But for this game, I'm going to assume Andy Dalton is still the starter, but who knows? They did sign Damiere Byrd from New England for a receiver, mainly a depth guy, not really going to do much there. Interestingly enough, they cut Charlie Leno. I don't really know why. They did draft Tevin Jenkins, but to play him at left tackle, I think is a little weird. I thought he was a surefire right tackle in this league, so, the Bears are going to bear, I guess. I guess their answer for right tackle was signing Elijah Wilkinson from Denver, who was, trash last year, in my opinion. Offensive line still needs work for the Bears, and, it doesn't help when you have someone like Andy Dalton under center. Now, where the Bears can hurt you is their front 7, which it's still pretty much exactly the same. Dangerous. Now, in their cornerback room, there is a slight shakeup. They lost Fuller, obviously, and added Desmond Trufant, who's significantly worse, so I think that's definitely going to hurt them. But the rest of the defensive backs, the safeties, and all that remain the same. So overall, the Bears are still going to ride on their defense, and their defense is going to play well and pretty much keep them in games, but then it's going to come down to either, Andy Dalton or Fields, game managing and doing just enough to win games. I think at this point in the year, it's still going to be Andy Dalton. The Bears are still going to be kind of struggling. Their offense isn't going to be as smooth. I don't think it's going to be Fields at this point, but regardless of the fact, I still think Green Bay takes a win here. So here in week 7, the Packers go back to Lambeau and play the Washington football team at 12 o'clock. A lot of people may overlook this game. I'm going to say myself, don't overlook this game. It's going to be, either Fitzmagic or Taylor Heineke at quarterback, but that's not really what you should be worrying about. This defense is just a very, very, very good defense. But switching back to the offense, they did add Curtis Samuel and Diami Brown to that wide receiver room, which was already a good wide receiver room. So I think this is going to be one of the, better wide receiver cores in the league, and that's really going to help either Fitzmagic or Heineke. Obviously already having McLaurin and Harmon there. And they also get this is the second year of Antonio Gibson, who was very impressive last year, and I think he grows on that. Their tight end is still Logan Thomas, which is definitely one of the most interesting stories in the league if Tim Tebow ends up being a tight end and actually doing something that might be a little bit more interesting, but it's actually a very similar story. As for their offensive line, still very similar. They did add Sam Cosmi in the draft, so very good pick there. And they also added Eric Flowers, which I don't know why he's still in the league, but he is, so they added him. He's, a stopgap, turnstile player, whatever. But where you're worried about the football team here is their defense. Their front seven is intense. It's dangerous. And they also just added Jamin Davis here at linebacker, so it makes it that much better. Their 4 defensive linemen and Chase Young, Deron Payne, Jonathan Allen, and Montez Sweat is arguably one of the best, if not the best, defensive lines in the league. They did lose Ronald Darby at cornerback, but they added William Jackson, so we'll go ahead and call that a wash. Defensive backs are definitely their weaker part of their defense, but that's not saying they're bad. So again, just like the Bears, it's a very solid defense, and it's going to come down to what the quarterback can do in the situation. And me personally, I think Fitzmagic is better than Andy Dalton. So I think this is still going to be a Green Bay win, but a very tight one, kind of like maybe a game-winning field goal, Mason Crosby 40-something yarder. But I think it's going to be a lot closer of a game than what people may think. So in Week 8, the Packers do have a short week heading all the way out to Arizona for Thursday Night Football at 7:20. I think Arizona is a big sleeper team. They got even better on offense. For the receivers, they added A.J. Green and Rondale Moore in the draft. Those two players are very stringent upon injuries. We'll see. They added James Conner, but I think Terrell Edmonds will still be the starting running back. But, having Conner there for goal line situations or just to, give Edmonds a breather is great. They added center Rodney Hudson, who was the 8th best center in the league last year, so that's a great addition there. Another O-line addition was guard Brian Winters from Buffalo. He was pretty bad last year, so maybe just a depth guy. He may have to start, though. So flipping over to defense for the Arizona Cardinals, the big signing, obviously the one we all wanted, was J.J. Watt. Having him and Chandler Jones together is not fair. I think they're going to wreak havoc. It's going to be, pretty crazy there. And then, of course, also with their first-round draft choice, they did indeed draft Zaven Collins out of Tulsa to pair him with Isaiah Simmons. They easily have two of the most, athletic freak of nature linebackers, which is perfect in a 3-4 system. Those are the two ideal backers you'd want there. A little weak on the run support, but overall, they're just two really good athletes. As for their cornerbacks, obviously they did lose Pat Pete, but they also lost Dre Kirkpatrick. Malcolm Butler is a nice stopgap corner. He's going to fill in right where Pat Pete left off. Malcolm Butler played pretty well last year, actually better than Patrick Peterson. And they also drafted cornerbacks Tay Gowan and Marco Wilson. I think they got great value in both those guys. So they still, have a solid, okay secondary, but it's definitely a lot younger. I think that's going to be their weaker point of their defense. But overall with this game, it scares me because it's such a short week and they got to go all the way across to Arizona. And I think that the Arizona Cardinals are a very talented team. This offense can be, one of the best in the leagues, and they have a very solid defense. So based on that, I think the Packers actually drop this game. It's going to be a tough game, a hard-fought game, but I think they lose here in Arizona. So Week 9, we have the Kansas City Chiefs in Kansas City at 3:25. Do we finally get Mahomes versus Rodgers? So when we went there 2 years ago, I bought tickets to that game, drove 12, 13 hours to go see it. Obviously the news with Mahomes with his knee issue, a couple weeks before. I went and saw Matt Moore versus Aaron Rodgers, which is still a good game, but I paid the premium earlier in the year to go watch Mahomes versus Rodgers, so will we finally get it? I don't have to speak much on the Chiefs. We know what they are, but one thing they did do is they really uprooted their offensive line. They added Orlando Brown. They traded for him. They added Joe Thuney. They added Kyle Long. He came out of retirement. They also added Austin Blythe and drafted Creed Humphrey, so 2 centers there. So they have 4 new starters at offensive line, which they obviously needed to do something after that Super Bowl performance because that offensive line was abysmal. As for wide receivers, running backs, and tight ends, they remain the same as they should, although they did lose Sammy Watkins, but drafted Cornell Powell, which I think is a good draft pick. As for their defense, their front 7 pretty much remains the same. They did draft Nick Bolton. They lost ex-Packer Bashaud Breeland at corner, but Snead and Ward at corner aren't terrible. They're more than serviceable, so but they also don't have great depth at corner. I think this is a really hard game for the Packers to win. I know this is 2 years ago and teams are different, but we saw, the Packers struggle against that team when it was Matt Moore and it was even a close game. It's in Kansas City again. It's hard to beat the Kansas City Chiefs in their stadium. I think the Chiefs hand the Packers their second straight loss here. So moving on to week 10 here, the Packers play the Seattle Seahawks at 3:25. Always a good game with the Seahawks. Always a good game. As for their team, they get healthy Chris Carson back. They drafted one of my favorites, Dwayne Eskridge. I'm really interested to see, how he operates with that offense with Russell Wilson. I think he'll be pretty good. Their offensive line still has issues. I don't think Russell Wilson will ever get, quality offensive linemen up there in Seattle. But overall, their offense is very, very similar to 2020. Overall, this team is very, very similar to their team in 2020. They did lose Jerron Reed at defensive tackle, but they added Al Woods, so kind of a wash there. They also haven't brought back KJ Wright yet at linebacker, a player actually I thought the Packers should look into. I think he would add a lot to the Packers, but Ben Burke-Irvin takes his role for right now. Who knows if they'll bring back KJ. They added Ahkello Witherspoon at corner, lost Shaquille Griffin, again. Kind of a wash there. They also drafted slot cornerback Trey Brown out of Oklahoma. Good pick there. But like I said, Seattle remains very similar. It's in Green Bay. I think Green Bay's a better team than Seattle. Russell Wilson's great, but in Green Bay, they usually have their number, so I think Green Bay gets a win here. So here in Week 11, we go out to Minnesota to visit the Star Wars Sandcrawler Stadium at 12 o'clock. Very solid looking team, as much as I hate to say the Vikings are. They had a good draft as well. We'll be facing against good old Kirk Cousins here, unless something extremely drastic happens, and for some weird reason Kellen Mond has to come in, but my money's on Kirk Cousins, playing this entire season starting. They got a really good pick in the draft in Christian Darrisaw. He should be starting at left tackle day one. The rest of the offensive line remains the same. Wide receivers are also the same, but they did draft Amir Smith-Marset, a guy I actually really liked. Now, at this point in the year at Week 11, he could start seeing some snaps, so maybe we'll see him here. As for their defense, a scary thing is Danielle Hunter does return. And one of their big signings, Dalvin Tomlinson, they signed, pun intended. They also signed Michael Pierce. Linebackers remain the same. They did draft Chaz Surratt, the former quarterback out of UNC. I think that was a little bit of a reach there. And then, of course, as I mentioned with the Cardinals game, they did add Patrick Peterson and Mackenzie Alexander there at corners. Now, they did lose Anthony Harris there at safety, but added Xavier Woods, so pretty much a wash there. Jeff Gladney, corners, as good as gone. So a complete cornerback room turnaround for the Minnesota Vikings here. I think the Packers probably split the Vikings this year, go 1-1, and they tend to struggle in Minnesota. This Minnesota team, as much as I hate to say it, is a solid-looking team. I see them finishing second in the division to the Packers. So I say they split the Vikings 1-1, and they lose here in Minnesota in Week 11. So here in Week 12, the Packers go back to Lambeau against the LA Rams to play the team they just played in the playoffs, but a complete different offense. Big offensive switch-up. Obviously with upgrade with Matt Stafford, which, their offense should ideally be better with Matt Stafford. One of the reasons being they have a very solid wide receiver core, and they just added Tutu Atwell, which I think also was a reach. The dude's 149 pounds, but hey, I wish nothing but the best for him. Hopefully he can succeed in the NFL. Also, second year of Cam Akers. I really like him at running back. I think just like Antonio Gibson, he's also going to improve. Now, they did lose starting center Austin Blythe, as I said, to the Kansas City Chiefs. And on defense, they lost Michael Brockers and Samson Ebukam. But they did draft Bobby Brown, a nice defensive tackle there in the draft. Overall, for the LA Rams defense, I think their weak point is linebackers. But as for the defensive backfield, they did lose two really quality starters. One in Troy Hill, who, was a great corner for them, and then one in John Johnson, who was a great safety for them. So I think that's going to really hurt their defense. Ramsey can't do it all. I think the pass defense definitely struggles this year for the Rams. So it's in Green Bay. It's a whole new offense for the Rams. I know it is Week 12, and they should have things figured out by then. But again, I think the pass defense is going to be pretty weak, and I think Aaron Rodgers should be able to carve it up. So I think the Packers win this one here in Week 12. As for Week 13, that is when the Packers do have their bye week. I really like this bye week considering there is 17 games now for each team. So this is a nice bye week. Now, there is a long stretch of 12 straight games, but this will allow, rest and whatnot. It's a lot better than, say, a Week 4 bye week. Right after the bye week in Week 14, we go up against the Chicago Bears again, Sunday Night Football. I think the same applies here. Maybe we see Justin Fields at this point. Maybe the Chicago Bears offense has done absolutely nothing. Andy Dalton's been, average at best, thrown some interceptions, hasn't really done much, and they finally make that switch. But I think it still depends on the QB play. And right now we have a really big unknown with Fields. How is he going to translate to the NFL? And if it's based on the QB play, in that case, I'm still taking Green Bay here with a win. So Green Bay sweeps Chicago again. Moving on to week 15, the Packers head over to Baltimore to play the Ravens at 12 o'clock. The Ravens are obviously a very solid team. It's going to be very hard for the Packers to contain Lamar Jackson. They also upgraded their wide receiver room, adding Sammy Watkins, drafting Rashad Bateman and Tylan Wallace, so adding a lot of talent there. Hopefully Lamar Jackson actually throws to them. Now, obviously, they did let go of running back Mark Ingram. I think a lot of people expected that to happen. It's pretty much J.K. Dobbins' role now at this point. Now, as for the offensive line, they did lose Orlando Brown, trading him to Kansas City, but they brought in Villanueva, which is a very solid player on his own. And they also signed Kevin Zeitler for guard there. And they also get Ronnie Stanley back from IR there. So overall, I think their offensive line actually got better, even though they did lose Orlando Brown. Now, their front seven does remain kind of the same. They did lose Matt Judon there to New England, but they did draft Jason Oweh, so I think at this point, Oweh should definitely be starting. They still have great cornerbacks in Humphrey, Marcus Peters, and Jimmy Smith. The safeties remain the same. Overall, like I said, just a very good team. The Packers are going to be away from home late in the year, Baltimore, 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock game here in the Eastern Standard Time. I think this is going to be a really tough game, and I actually see the Packers, losing this one here, week 15. Moving on to week 16, an interesting one here. The Packers actually play on Christmas Saturday against the Cleveland Browns in Lambeau at 3:30. Again, another very solid team, probably one of the better teams on paper, Cleveland is. They get back healthy Odell Beckham, and their offense mainly remains the same, so basically it's going to be dependent on how well Baker Mayfield does play. They did draft wide receiver Anthony Schwartz out of Auburn, so I'm definitely interested to see what kind of role he gets in Cleveland. Very intriguing player. Now, where this team definitely scares you is defensive line, linebacker, so front seven. They added Andrew Billings to Davian Clowney, drafted Tommy Togiai, so the D-line just gets even scarier. Obviously, considering, Myles Garrett's still sitting there trying to rip your quarterback's head off. They also really upgraded their linebacker room, signing Anthony Walker from Indianapolis, and then somehow, stealing Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah in the second round of the draft due to the, heart thing that came out about him. But I think JOK is still going to be a good player in this league, and is definitely going to be a steal probably there for the Browns. They added a lot of defensive backfield talent in cornerback Troy Hill from the Rams, drafted Greg Newsome, and they also added from the Rams John Johnson. So Troy Hill and John Johnson switched from the Rams to the Browns, two very, very, very solid starters. So yeah, just they added a lot of defensive talent, this team did. And based off of that, a lot of people may think, hey, this is going to be a loss. The Cleveland Browns is a great team on paper, but at the end of the day, it's prime time in Green Bay considering it's on Christmas. It is at 3:30, but it still should be a cold day there on December 25th. It's in Lambeau. The Packers are home late in the year, week 16. Who knows what kind of injuries might occur for the Browns or how well they're playing. I think Green Bay wins this one. As for week 17, the Packers match up against the Minnesota Vikings for their second time. This is Sunday Night Football at 7:20. Everything remains the same from week 11. Obviously, a lot can change via injury and people getting benched and whatnot. But as I said earlier, I do have Green Bay splitting Minnesota 1-1, them losing the one in Minnesota. So I think they take this one here, primetime Lambeau, week 17. So moving on to the final game, week 18, which still sounds so weird to say. I still can't even process the whole record switch up. I'm so used to the 12-4, 11-5, 10-6, 8-8. The fact that you can't have an 8-8 team now, unless you, I guess, tie a game, it's very weird. So week 18, they go to Detroit, finishing up in Detroit there at 12 o'clock. I still think the offense for the Detroit Lions is pretty bad at this point. And this is no discredit to Jared Goff, but you're throwing him into like a offense with little to no talent. And you're not really helping him out. So I think Jared Goff is a solid quarterback. But I know he's not, like I said, he's not getting any help. And I still think this offense is going to be, one of the worst in the league. And they're definitely going to be fourth in division. I think the Packers, sweep Detroit and get a W here to finish up the year. So that finishes up my record prediction for the Green Bay Packers at 12-5 on the year. It's still very weird to say, as I said. I just can't get that through my mind yet still. But I think that's a very realistic prediction for the Green Bay Packers. They do have a very tough schedule. But at the end of the day, if Aaron Rodgers is the starting quarterback of the Green Bay Packers, I don't think there's any team that they can't beat. Now, obviously, they're going to lose some games. And I don't think they're going to go 17-0. But I still think 12-5 is a very realistic record for this team. This team brought back pretty much everyone that they needed to bring back to make another run at a Super Bowl. Now it's just down to, figuring out this whole situation with Aaron Rodgers, getting him back on the football team, putting him under center for week 1, and taking another drive at winning a championship, because this team can definitely do it. And, if they go 12-5, win their division, they could be, second seed, third seed, maybe even first. It depends, but overall, this team can win a championship. It's just down to what happens with this Aaron Rodgers situation. I believe he's going to be the starting quarterback week 1, but I'm interested to hear your thoughts on the schedule. What do you think about it? What games do you think the Packers will lose? What games do you think will be tough? And overall, what is your final record prediction for the Packers for 2021? Leave it down in the comments below. On that note, I hope you enjoyed my analysis of the 2021 Green Bay Packers schedule. Catch you all in the next one. As always, go Pack Go.